Hi, good morning everybody. Welcome to the second day. This morning I want to tell you about a small project which is part of a larger decolonisation project at Amgueddfa Cymru that's been running for about 18 months. Now this small project called Rights and Rites ran for about 8 months and it was funded by a small grant from the AHRC. It's based at National Museum Cardiff, which for those of you who know Cardiff know it's in the Civic Centre, right in the middle of the city. We're currently decolonising the collections and aiming to make the collections more representative of the local communities. Our current botany collections number some 800,000 specimens, but the focus is on Welsh and European specimens, and only some 10% of the collection comes from outside of Europe. Focus of this project is specimens from the Indian subcontinent, and these are concentrated in the Economic Botany Collection. You can see a few examples here. The Economic Botany Collection is of specimens that have biocultural, economic, or other cultural value. They include seeds, barks, roots, leaves, and it's divided into sections according to whether they're medicinal, food plants, raw materials, and so on. But this is the section of the collection that's really been heavily influenced by colonisation. But this is just one part of the collection we were looking at. We're also looking at the timber collections, which is some 12,000 specimens, the herbarium specimens, a few botanical illustrations. We've got a collection of some 7,000 botanical illustrations, just a few of them from South Asia. And also down here you can see these jars. These are our Materia Medica collection, which is around about 500 specimens collected by Professor Terry Turner from the pharmacy department at the university, which was donated in 2007. And these are plant products that all have medicinal properties. So the aim of the project is to co-curate new interpretations for our specimens, drawing on people's lived experience and their cultural understanding. We also aim to create new permanent records for the specimens to include this new co-curated content, to engage with community groups, and also to encourage dialogue and knowledge exchange about the Indian flora between the community and curators, and also within the community between generations. So just to introduce the team working on the project, the 8-month project. I'm Heather, and I was principal investigator, so leading the project and coordinating the project. On the left here you can see Nathan Kitto, who's my co-author, and he was absolutely marvellous. His responsibility was digitising the specimens, getting them out of the storage, and also doing research on them and doing the work of adding the information to the collections management system. Dr. Poppy Nicol here was in charge of running the community workshops and helping to design the questionnaires that were used in the workshops. Jessica Dunrod was the project manager leading the decolonisation aspect of the project, and she was marvellous at connecting with new communities and also running workshops. So there were two main strands to the project. We were working with members of the community through 3 workshops and 2 public meetings. The second strand was digitising specimens from the Indian subcontinent and producing 3D scans. And in parallel with this, we were doing research on the use and provenance of specimens in the collection. And alongside this, we had a social media presence. So for each of the workshops, we invited people from the local communities, there's quite a lot of work to get people to come along. So we use a variety of media. We use social media to advertise using Twitter. We also contacted quite a few faith communities, local temples and mosques. We even resorted to leafleting at some points, and I think Jessica was almost on the point of dragging people in off the street at one point. So the questionnaires were designed to ask the participants about their knowledge, interests and perception of the museum. And we asked them to complete questionnaires before the workshops and after to see how people's attitudes had changed. The first workshop was about plants as medicines. And this encouraged really interesting discussion. You know, we asked people to recall their memories. There were quite a few people there in their 50s and 60s, and you could see they were going back to their childhood and explaining how the plants in front of them evoke these memories of how they'd used the plants as children. For example, something like turmeric. Lots of them were familiar with it, using it as an antiseptic or a disinfectant, talking about how they used it to heal wounds and skin complaints. For example, this lady was telling us about how she was worried that she was going to miss a wedding because she had a gash on her leg, but her mother put on some turmeric and mustard oil, and overnight it was healed. So, you know, really interesting expertise held in the community. Other people were talking about garlic, for example, saying how they might use garlic and milk together to ward off colds. So, you know, this really gave a different aspect to the specimens. Lots of our specimens might just say turmeric from India, and, you know, that's all we have. But by consulting the community, we could really learn much more. The second workshop was looking at plants for food, and this encouraged a lot of discussion. This really brought out regional differences between different parts of India. Lots of people had different ideas about how you should cook a really good biryani. Also, it brought out information about differences between different classes. They were saying that, you know, something common like chilies and onions were used by all classes, but then maybe only the more wealthy people could use spices such as garam masala or saffron. So in this workshop, they pointed out where there are gaps in our collection. So that's really helpful for us, you know, because we're not as familiar with the spices. It really helped to have that insider knowledge. Now, the third workshop was all about plants in ceremonies and rituals, and lots of new ideas came out here. One of the ladies was a yoga teacher, and she was explaining how she liked to burn frankincense to cleanse the air, to get people spiritually ready for yoga classes. And she brought some frankincense with her, but we did see if one tiny scrap of the specimen that was 100 years old would burn, and it did. It went really well. Don't tell my boss. The chap that you can see in the photograph is a devotee of Krishna, and you can see he's wearing his tulsi beads, and this is part of his religious beliefs. He wears these beads because he believes that tulsi beads ward off evil spirits and ghosts. And he was also showing us the largest string of beads he uses for his meditation. He meditates for 2 or 3 hours every day and uses these beads. Also, we discussed different rituals around weddings and other ceremonies. For example, the participants were explaining how important henna painting is before weddings. You know, this is all part of what we would call the hen party, that people paint themselves with henna. And there are stories such as, you know, some people think that if you paint yourself with henna, the longer the henna lasts, the longer the marriage will last. And also they were telling us about special celebratory dishes. For example, a lady was telling us about coconut, and she remembered some 50 years her mother creating special dishes using coconut that we used it for celebrations, and also how coconuts in the in the bride's garland, and how there's a ritual that a coconut is broken at the start of the wedding. So this was really useful exercise. It meant that knowledge could be exchanged with the curators, but also between different generations and between communities. So this was the main strand. We had the questionnaires as well, and this shows how people's knowledge of the collection changed over time. A lot of the people who came along to the workshops just hadn't been to the museum before at all. You know, there was this perceived barrier that the museum really wasn't for them. But, you know, I think they felt a bit more comfortable after, and they were interested in the collections, made lots of suggestions about the kind of events that we could run to encourage more people to come along and become involved. Coming back to the digitisation, as part of the project, Nathan managed to digitise over 1,000 specimens, and these digitised images can be used to facilitate access. They can be made available online. They're already available as part of blogs, and we can share this with other countries. The project came as a follow-on project, a Kitto follow-on project. So the museum had used the main grant to buy some fancy new digitisation equipment. And we selected around 20 specimens to produce 3D scans. And these are fantastic because you can rotate the specimen, so it's like you're holding it in your hand. There are limitations to the kind of specimens that you can produce 3D scans of. They have to be the right size and not too shiny, just the right kind of texture. But, you know, these are absolutely marvellous, and these have been published. So some interesting outcomes and outputs. We've developed new partnerships with members of the local Asian community, and we've co-curated some of our botanical specimens, so we know much more about cultural contents, and we can add this information to our collection management system. So by sharing and working together with local communities, there's much more awareness of our botanical collections, particularly some of these specimens from Asia that really hadn't seen the light of day for a long while. You know, they hadn't been priority collections before, so that was really nice. We've got films of the workshops that we shared in a variety of contexts. We've got a library of the digital images, and we've got blogs on several of the aspects of the project, including blogs by the workshop participants, and we have a publication planned. So thinking about the discussion yesterday, I was back on the project and tried to think what were the good points and the bad points. Some of the bad points were the timing. Lots of things went wrong with the timing. The project happened just as the museum was rebranding and getting a new ticketing system, and the lady running the project at the HRCN just went on maternity leave, and after she'd gone, nobody seemed to know what was going on at HRC, so that was a bit of an issue. Also, because there was quite a short lead-in time, this created problems within the museum, because the museum's quite bureaucratic and we like to have all the events and everything in place 6 months in advance. So if you only knew 2 months in advance that you're getting the grant, then you weren't very popular, really. And it turned out to be a much larger project than anticipated. I originally thought it would only be around about 500 specimens, but once we started delving into the herbarium collections, it turned out to be well over 1,000. But the good aspects were, it was a fantastic team to work with. It was really productive. We had some unique experiences. Without that project like this, when else would I have had lunch with the local Krishna community, with statue of Krishna in the corner? So that was really exciting. And we learned so much about plants and the collections using the expertise available in the community. And it was great to share that expertise. And it was so nice to be with people. You know, you could see from their faces, they were going back to their childhood, and, you know, it was just wonderful. It was the texture of the specimens and the smells, and it really took them back to their childhood. So there we are, I'll leave it there. Okay, any questions?
of your interviews, again. The first workshop was actually you took the specimens out into the community, and then followed that with bringing them in to the venue.
Right, okay. The question is about the venue. Would it have been a good idea to have the first workshop outside in the community and then to bring people in? And as it worked out, the first two workshops actually in the museum were better attended. We didn't make enough contacts to have the full complement of 14. It was just that people in the workshop said, oh, you know, some of our friends and other people in the community just think the museum's not for them. You know, they find it too imposing, too intimidating, which is quite sad, you know, that people find it off-putting, or they think they're going to be shouted at and be doing the wrong thing if they come inside. So somehow we've got to get over that barrier. So hopefully by doing a few more events like this, people were for their time. So, you know, they were fully compensated. We did run the third workshop out in the community. We had slightly fewer people there, but then that was partly to do with the crash on the M4, so some people couldn't quite make it. But yeah, I think going forwards, maybe we should make more effort to take our specimens out into the community, to run more events out in the community, maybe just in public places, things like supermarkets and so on. We've done that with shopping centres, and you know, people who have never been in the museum think, oh, this is quite interesting. Maybe that's the way in. Do we have another question now? That's fine.
To run around. And this is really a question: how do you capture this kind of data? You talked about you're going to have publications, blogs, but it's maybe a question for other people. I'd love to hear, maybe later in the breaks and stuff. Like, how do you record the data that you're collecting from the communities so that it's doesn't disappear?
Yeah.
Are you putting it into the database?
Yes, we are. Yeah.
How are you doing that?
Right. The question is, how do we capture the data that we've got from the community? And how do we put into the database? So for each species, we've done research on medical applications and so on. So for each species, we've got a summary that we include in the notes in the collections database. But then it's harder to capture the more anecdotal evidence, things like the lady with the poorly knee, you know. But we have got the videos, we've got a summary film as well. And we've got the publication. I'm not quite sure what more we can do really. But people in the workshops were saying, oh, you know, we are quite excited about this because people who have lived here in this country for a long time are saying, oh, we're worried about information being lost. You know, the younger generation might never go back to India. We just don't want that expertise to be lost. So maybe museums have a part to play there.
So I wonder if you did research about community or whether you based your outreach on a particular part of the collection that you wanted to know more about, and then looked from the relevant communities. And I also wondered whether you've got anything ongoing or follow-up with the same groups.
So the question is, did we research the community first and then look at our specimens, or vice versa? And what follow-on work is there? So we put the proposal together quite quickly. So we were looking for a part of the collection that we knew something about that would be the right kind of size, really. So we started off with the collection. We thought that there would be around about 500 specimens. In the event, it turned out to be over 1,000 and still counting, actually. So it turned out to be much bigger than we thought it would be. But, you know, we were aware that there was already a very vibrant community from South Asia, and we had some contacts already. And those same people are involved with some of the other decolonisation projects. But that is something I'm slightly worried about. You know, we've gone in, we've involve people in these workshops, and how can we develop this relationship? How can we keep it going? You know, it's not fair to just involve people and then drop them. So this is something we need to look at in the longer term.
Thank you. I think in the interest of keeping to time, if you have the further questions, you can speak to Heather during the break, and she'll be more than happy to have a discussion. Thank you very much, Heather.